Hey guys, this is Faster U4 brought to you by FitLab, Tailwind Nutrition, Biomaxa and Kapiti cycles. If you're a cyclist, you want to go faster? Then let's giddy up. So, hey guys, back to Faster U4 brought to you by FitLab, Tailwind Nutrition, Biomaxa, Kapiti cycles. Hey! Bike racing yesterday. First race in about, 8 weeks or 6 weeks or something like that. And it's the kind of like, it's winter, but it's sort of for me the first race of the sort of spring time races. So you've got this, which is the Kapiti Winter Series, which I'll talk about how that went in a minute and stuff I learned. Then you've got some of the events starting from the Wellington Masters Cycling Club, PMP Cycling Club, road races, time trials, mountain bike races. There's a few cross races from Hut Cross and Kapiti Club sprinkled in over the next few weeks as well. And then from September, there's some bigger sort of local fondo races. There's, I'll let the dog out for a wee, shall I? There's stuff like Taupo, which I'm doing this year. And of course the North Island Team Series, which is something I want to win. We have entered a FitLab team, and we will be running to win. We have a new rider, Tim Dalglish, will be joining the team from comes from a background racing the Australian circuit. He's a very strong rider. We will have Scott McDonnell, who does what I do for FitLab, coach and tester down in Christchurch. We'll have Andrew Jamieson, the owner of FitLab, coach and tester in Tauranga. We'll have Lee Campbell, who's a well-known stalwart of Wellington racing and excellent time trialist, breakaway type rider, a bit like me. We will have Chris Sutherland, who is good all-rounder. Team manager will be Ben Copsey, who famously hurt himself last year by riding into a wall at not his own fault, I might add, at about 50k an hour, setting up for a sprint final stage of the North Island Series last year. We will have Yuri and Gertz, another strong team rider and breakaway specialist, and me, who will be looking to do okay. It's no secret that I want to do well. We'll have to see who turns up with what firepower. So, the Kapiti Winter Series kicked off yesterday. A, B, C, D grades. A and B doing 3 laps of the Kapiti circuit. This is kind of well known as a kind of like a flat, very flat really, 21 kilometre circuit in just off School Road, Kapiti. And a lot of people are scared off doing it. One, because the weather's pretty ropey this time of year. Having said that, the last 7-8 races I've done there have actually been really good weather. Average is about 13 degrees in Wellington this time of year, but up the coast yesterday it was getting up to 16, 17, 18 degrees. It was nice. And not super windy or anything. So the other reason people are a little bit scared is because it's so flat and does require, to do really well, a certain amount of flat horsepower. So it comes back to this problem we've talked about before, where you can be someone who's got a lot of power to weight, but if you are a smaller person, the gross amount of the relative power you make isn't so important on the flat. You're up against aerodynamics rather than weight. and you really ideally want to be a bigger, stronger kind of rider. I mean, even me at close to 80 kilos with a pretty good FTP, you know, like there are guys who are very big and strong and who are very scary on a course like this. So the two guys who I was strongly aware of yesterday in A grade, Dan Wilashewski and Vaughan Pretorius. Vaughan is an excellent young sprinter, really muscular dude, and has got a really great kick on him. Probably not in quite the same form as last year, but super dangerous regardless. He can actually break away and go pretty good. Dan is is a very strong, muscular rider, again, big and very aggressive. So early in the race, kind of coming out of a corner, Dan lit it up pretty hard. I followed his wheel, and no one else did. Pretty quickly, within a few minutes, we were bridged by Vaughan. And Vaughan, Dan, and I lapped it out for about 1.5 laps or 2 laps together. So a long time, about 30, 40 Ks together, maybe something like that. Very strong, hard turns, and we were going pretty well. And at one stage we had 40-second lead on the bunch with about a lap to go, which should have been enough, but unfortunately it was kind of the thing I learnt. The thing I was shown or demonstrated was that kind of thing can evaporate pretty quick if you don't work well together. That's a little bit what happened, where Dan was obviously feeling really strong, because he is, and wanted to shake us off because we weren't able to take the sort of strong turns as he was. So I'm coming through taking turns of about 400 to 450 watts for 30 seconds. Vaughan doing much the same, but clearly Dan was even stronger than that, which, by the way, is already pretty strong. And wanted to shake us, and he wasn't strong enough to shake us. He would attack from the front, from the back. He tried lots of things, but could always be chased down by me and Vaughan. And that went on a lot, and there would be this period of relatively brief periods of accelerations and a lot of slowdown as everyone caught their breath. And that reduces your average speed, and you don't have to reduce it much before the bunch can see you. And then they start to get this idea that, well, you can be caught, there'll be some organisation. That's what happened, and quickly we were reeled in. And then it came all back together, and the last lap really was some attacks, not very strong. I think, I could be wrong, I think Matt Webb-Smith, if he was there, I think it was him that went off for a breakaway win with about 5 Ks to go. And unfortunately, an interesting thing happened where me, Vaughan and Dan kind of marked each other out of the race. So what that means, or how it applies to yesterday, was a lot of guys fell off out of the bunch. So we were left with a starting group of, say, 20 A graders or something. We were left with about 10. And one guy off the front. So what do? Well, my sprint is not that great, so I wanted to mark the guys who I knew were pretty good sprinters, Dan and Vaughan, who are both about equal in a sprint like the one we had. Plus it was a headwind, so I didn't want to go early. I didn't want to really back myself to go off the front, which maybe I should have in hindsight. But in Dan, anyway, so I was making Dan and Vaughan. Vaughan was making Dan and me. Dan was making me and Vaughan. You get the idea. We So if someone would hurl themselves off the front, which happened 2, 3, 4 times, we would sit there looking at each other waiting for them to close down the gap on the basis that we wanted to mark that person for the sprint, assuming that each other would close that gap. We didn't, and what happened was 2, 3, 4 guys went off the front. They weren't chased, including, I think, a guy I've mentioned before, very impressive, Camden Faint. I was stalking some of his Strava numbers. This is a very small, light, young rider who was producing at least 315 watts or so for a few minutes off the front by himself near the end, which is, in terms of power to weight, this could be, I don't know, I'm guessing his weight at probably low 50s. That could be 5.5 plus watts per kilo at the end of a race like that on the flat by yourself. That's very strong and impressive. So congratulations on that, Camden. Keep an eye on that young guy. And some other riders did well. So we did have a sort of half-assed sprint for the line between me, Vaughan and Dan. Dan getting on my wheel, I kind of misjudged it, went a bit early, and took me, followed by Vaughan, which kind of probably matched our form ultimately, but it was unfortunate that we'd marked each other out, so we couldn't really be at the pointy end. So that's a learning. I don't know what, it's a funny thing to have happen. That happened, and I'm not really sure what the takeaway is, because, well, how would I play that differently? I don't know. If I had chased down those riders, I suspect Vaughan and Dan would have jumped on my wheel, sprinted me. May not have really changed the outcome. I don't know if I had tried. Obviously, what I tried didn't really work. Although I think as a percentage move, it probably wasn't bad. The other kind of option that springs to mind would be, a breakaway earlier. I'm not saying super late early, but and maybe with maybe 10Ks to go, maybe trying to 5Ks, maybe trying to bridge up to the guy, I think Matt, who went off the front. Then again, as a percentage move, I think that would actually be quite low, because I think people would probably jump on the Steve train. So this is kind of one of those things where cycling, maybe here's the takeaway. You don't always get to, in road racing, you don't always get to do what you want to do, because it's a game of chess with other players. And so maybe the takeaway is, don't let that get you down. That is just kind of like mountain bike racing. Part of it is that you will at some point have some mechanical, that's more common in mountain bike racing, a puncture or a mechanical that's not really your fault, or is unlucky, or there's a stick goes in your spokes, or you have an unlucky crash. That's kind of part of that game. Part of road racing is the tactics game. Maybe one of the events that doesn't really have this, or negates it as much as possible, is time trialing, which I kind of like, because you can do a lot of analysis and pretty much go out there and do it. Of course, you can still puncture and stuff like that, or get unlucky with a wind change, but mostly things are variables are very controllable. So if you're the kind of rider who gets really emotionally put off by those things not going quite right for you in a race, well, here's an idea: try time trialing, because you can control those things. So that's kind of the rundown of that. Here's a video, if you're looking at the screen, of the sprint for B grade, which I took and did a little slow-mo here. So we'll run through this. So we've got this guy. We've got a group of, I think it pretty much stayed together in B grade. From the report, I understand there was breakaway attempts by, I think, Ollie Ferry and Steve O'Keefe, and they didn't really come to much. And you kind of get that awful B grade itis. So in A grade, I found, as a generality, everyone's beating themselves to death so viciously that sometimes when a guy makes a move, it can stick because everyone's so shagged. It's like no one's got anything left to go. You're on the limit more. Say if everyone's capable of operating at 100%, everyone in an A grade race is usually operating somewhere between 95 and 100%. But in a B grade race, you don't get that so much. The speeds are lower, the efforts are generally lower, and they sort of average 2, 3, 4 Ks an hour less in a race like this, which when you look at power numbers, could be anywhere like literally 25% down the level power levels that per rider that, what my dog's doing there, that the A grade riders are doing. And what that means is there's more in reserve, so they're kind of like operating, Jimmy, knock it off, about 80%. So you can always reel people in that try moves. You don't have this really on the rivet, eating the stem sensation so much. And I think that's what happened to those breakaways in B grade yesterday. The group can generally bring it in. So you can see there's a big sprint here. I'm going to say, could be, I don't know, what is it, 20 riders in here or something? 15, 20 riders. So you've got this unit off the front here who's clearly the strongest sprinter. And I don't know him, but I understand he didn't do that much work on the front, which is fine. That's called bike racing. And clearly has a good sprint. It's a muscly unit. And you can see he's winning by about 2 bike lengths. That's in a course like this, in a group like this, that's not a bad tactic. Coming over the line about 3rd place on the right there in the black, Stephen O'Keefe. Generally he looks pretty good. He's got his head down in line with his torso pretty good. Arms wide, strong position. Can't see too much wrong with that. I don't think the fact that he's on the inside particularly matters because he didn't have the horsepower to come around the other guys anyway, so not bad. Not bad positioning. A few other guys coming through, Mike Proudfoot there. A little bit good time trialist, but maybe he picked his position wrong for the sprint or went early. You can see coming through here Matt Weber as well, so like super strong in the green rivet gear there, super strong breakaway type rider, but maybe misjudged the sprint and kind of gave up, I don't know. Never been that great a sprinter, and well, not actually, I shouldn't say never, I don't know, but I've always usually managed to sprint him. But the kind of guy because kind of Matt Weber's the kind of guy who's a bit hard to guess because he's not that big a unit. He's not a huge dude, kind of skinny dude, but can put it in the gutter at 500 watts for like a couple of minutes and you're just gagging. And I've seen him do that. And so he's a good guy to be on a breakover with, and also a good guy in general. So it's kind of the B grade sprint. A few stragglers coming in towards the end. Maybe that was another thing I sort of ran through my mind yesterday was, when these big flat surges are happening on the flat, you need to have some thoughts in your mind. I certainly did. So, if there's one thing that a lot of riders, especially middle-aged dudes who lose muscle mass, start struggling with. I went to the next one. It's my kids on a swing. Mount Vic, you should try that swing if you haven't. One thing that ran through my mind was, a lot of middle-aged guys who run out of muscle mass, they start struggling in flat surge power. This is when, just like I mentioned, you've got a guy like Dan, he can just put out a massive amount of power in the gutter, and there was nothing to do about that except try to stay on the wheel, right? Which is a lot easier said than done. Okay, I got 2 thoughts about that. Number one is realize it will stop. And it will stop quite suddenly, like, so that's an anaerobic effort. And even very strong, big, powerful riders don't have that long to do that. It will stop after about 10, 20, 30 seconds. It will stop. So make your job to be glued to that wheel and take out the part where you're uncomfortable and just do the mental game. So your mental whiteboard's in front of you. Put a line through, this is painful, and thinking about that part, and just put a red underline under the bit that says, my job is, and your job in that scenario is to stay on the wheel. Number 2 is get aero. I mean, what's going to happen is this big surge, it's in the gutter. You're doing this move, well, the wheel, the gap's going to open a little, and you'll come out of the draft for 5-10 seconds. I want you in those drops. I want you to think about having good, strong power. Being on the right gear helps. Often you know if this is going to happen. Pick your gearing right. And think, Mark Cavendish, the famous Cavendish move of head quite low, obviously staying safe, looking ahead. I'm sort of doing it now as much as I can, and thinking about reducing that aero drag as much as possible until you get on the wheel. And, when you think about it, that's quite important because you might get an extra 20 watts out of that. And 20 watts when you're groveling to stay on the wheel, I will take that any day. So that's some of my thoughts on the race. A few things that happened. The sprint. The other thing I'll mention before I go is yesterday I've had a new bike. So this is a Chapter 2 Riri Aero frame set. I kitted the frame set with the optional one-piece carbon mana bar from Chapter 2, full mechanical Dura-Ace 9100 and Zip 404 wheels. So reliable aero bike for racing this season, and it does have some mods, particularly that are supposed to help in all wind yaw conditions. So things like has the cutout seat tube, aero positioning of the seat stays, to direct the airflow around the brakes a little better, the bowed front fork, a narrower down tube. So lots of things that are supposed to add up to a general increase or improvement of around about 20 watts, I think, on average. Something like that in most yaw angles. It compares a little, I think it's not quite as good as Cavallo S5, judging by wind tunnel data, but very marginal. There's a handful of watts in it, but better than pretty much all other aero bikes on the market. The S5 is probably the gold standard, and judging by a few people who have them, and the amount of testing we've done on the road, real world, you can see a difference. The major downside of the S5 is it costs a lot of money, at least 10, 11, 12 grand to get one how you want it. So I don't really know. There is a lot of aero tweaks on that bike. So the difference at, say, 400 watts in most yaw angles between the Riri and the S5, probably about 5, maybe 10 watts, something like that. So not a huge amount, and for the price, and kind of the looks as well. I quite like the Riri. So this was the first race I'd done on it, and it's weird. Like, until you really, I've trained on it a few times for the last 3 weeks or so, but you don't really get a sense of what a bike's like until you put a lot of power in a hurry, or are in a breakaway or something like that. And when you've ridden enough bikes, you can get a feel for things. And there's this horrible sensation, which is, I do feel like the bike is slipperier, say over 40 kilometers an hour in that aero position on the drops in a breakaway, but there's no real world way of quantifying that versus a control like a standard frame bike. So I don't have, you can't really look at power, speed. There's no way to do it in a scientific way. So all I've got to go by is feel. Feels good. You know, it's highly possible part of that is something really simple, like the fact that the tubes are bigger, it's a stiffer bike than the Cannondale I was used to. So while it's not quite as comfortable, it's very responsive. Maybe a little more of the power gets through the drivetrain like that. I don't know. It does feel good, and as the speed gets faster, it feels better and better. And it just has a really good fit for me, I'll say that. Like I've said before, something about the angles on the the seat tube or something like that. Or maybe the curving bit of fork, I don't know. Seems to set it up for a really nice, powerful position under me. So I was quite happy with that bike. If there's a way I can think of to quantify the difference, I will. For now, it's only the wind tunnel data published by Chapter 2, which I've got to go on, and comparison data you can find on sites like aeroweenie.com. That's all you can use. So far so good, no problems. There's generally a rule where the first time you race a bike, something will go wrong. You will break a chain or some bolt will loosen or something, but no, they haven't. So that was also pretty good. So when there. So coming up, we've got 3 more weeks where there is the Kapiti Winter Series. Same course every week. If you are scared of a race like this for the above mentioned flat and weather related reasons, look at it as training to get better at producing that surge power. Sometimes there's no way in training to suffer as much as you can or will during a race. And if you are coming up to a part of the season where you want to add some anaerobic capacity, sometimes that's not a bad way to do it. And you might learn something tactically about how to stay on when it's really hard. So, do something that is difficult for you. This type of race is difficult for a lot of riders, and I'd recommend it for that exact reason. This next 3 weeks after that, we've got start of the club season, time trials, road races, and I woke up in the middle of the night last night. I'll leave you with this, which is, I need kind of a different challenge. Thought about challenges about, time trialing, that worked out pretty well in the past. Road racing stuff, I'm kind of in that phase. Thinking back to mountain bike. A few guys have tagged me on some pictures on Facebook lately. Said, Steve, you should try some mountain bike races again. Well, there are some very big mountain bike races coming up. October, November, a little further north. Very big and very long. And as far as I can tell, kind of good for a roadie type rider. I'm looking at dates and doing some stalking at previous winners' power data numbers. And could be time for a big old middle-aged time trialist to see what that does, what dropping that into a big long mountain bike race looks like compared to guys who actually know what they're doing. We'll find out more to come. As always, this is brought to you by FitLab, Tailwind Nutrition, Biomaxa, Capital Style.